This chart on the Bloomberg just showing how really new yuan loans and aggregate financing all missed expectations. It seems that demand is pretty weak, despite the fact that we're seeing these targeted measures from policymakers actually been broadened. What are you expecting in terms of the demand picture in the country?
Yes, so thanks. Great to be on. So the problem with China really is that it's pretty much a demand side story. And I think that the recent policies that we're seeing from the government is not quite assuring. I mean, a lot of analysts talk about how there are not enough details in terms of implementation. But really, I think the problem is that most of these measures are on the supply side. So without really boosting demand side of the picture, and we have seen that very clearly in the credit data, we are likely to see momentum pick up very much meaningfully going forward. The credit data really last week was quite disappointing for a few measures. If you look at the household loans data, which is really a good measure of the kind of consumption, the kind of demand picture of the economy, it's been quite low. And part of that reflects the fact that in July, typically there is very strong seasonality effects. But part of that also reflects the fact that the property sector is still very much in correction mode, which means that the risk aversion amongst consumers are still pretty high.
And we have the PBOC, of course, setting the one-year rate today and really not expected to do much, keep it steady. But what can they actually do in terms of monetary policy when demand is that weak?
Yeah, so we've said for a long time that really the monetary transmission mechanism, as we like to call it, in China is pretty much broken. And that is, the fact that even if you increase credit supply, if there is no demand to meet that, you kind of have that pass-through effect somewhat muted. I do think that the focus of PBOC right now is to really ensure that liquidity conditions remain quite ample in the system, and that would really help facilitate some of these fiscal measures that perhaps the government is looking to put in place. I don't necessarily think that there is much of an impact from 10 bips, 20 bips move in the MLF, which is why us, as well as much of the street this week, is not really expecting a drop in the MLF or for the other benchmark rates for that matter for this month. But I do think that it does signal a very strong easing policy for PBOC, which is why we do still expect that there will be some kind of a decrease in the MLF perhaps in the next month or in the next quarter.
So, Louise, you mentioned this lack of demand for lending in China. There's not a huge amount of demand coming from offshore either. We've got foreign direct investment declining. How long do you see that trend enduring for? And can foreign investors really continue to ignore a market of China's size for too long?
I think much of that, I wouldn't say aversion, much of that slowdown that we see in foreign direct investments going into China is really driven by a few factors. One is the fact that the regulatory environment onshore has been quite uncertain, even though I think President Xi and as well as high-level authorities have been very much focused on attracting investments. That really hasn't worked. And of course, you add in the mix that, there's geopolitical tensions, there is a U.S. new outbound investment review mechanism that they are looking to put in place. These are the factors that really, I think, spook investors. I don't think that this is a temporary phenomenon. I would expect that drag to persist for a while, which is why I think over time you would see, China's balance of payments surplus does get smaller over time. I think that it doesn't necessarily mean that there is nothing that the government cannot do. I do think that the continued push for investments coming into China, especially if you think about the new technology sectors, the advanced manufacturing, these are the sectors that China does have a very strong competitive advantage of then I do think that these are the sectors that perhaps authorities should channel their focus on in terms of attracting investments.